Hi everybody, I'm Jenny. Welcome to The Edge Confidential. I'm here with Janae. Hi Janae, how are you today?
I'm really good today. Thank you for having me here.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Thanks for bringing donuts for all of us.
Had to.
We'll be eating those after. We're almost to the weekend.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Cheat day's coming up.
That's right. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah.
You have so much to talk about, so much to share. I think your topics and what you're passionate about is so important for the population to hear, and it needs to be talked about more.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I'm sure everybody's kind of wondering, okay, what does that mean?
Yeah.
But what does it mean for you to be in the community that you're in and make sure that you're advocating and having a purposeful life in that space?
Sure. So I think in order to really discuss like the communities that I'm passionate about is really, I think, coming to terms with who I am and how those two connect, you know, and who I am is I'm an identified queer therapist. I am a Latin X individual, born and raised in Southern California. So the culture is like everything, you know, to me. And for me, what's really important is really to increase our education and awareness on how I think individuals from that community can understand their process, you know, heal, grow, thrive, as well as help providers and organizations really understand, you know, just different aspects and complexities about those populations and how they can better serve those folks.
So how has your journey been through this whole experience?
Yeah. Oh man. That's a long-winded answer for sure.
You're gonna be here for a while.
Yeah. You know, and here's what I guess to really understand that, I think I kind of have to start from the beginning.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I grew up, I would just say like I'm a product of complex trauma. I'm a product of intergenerational trauma. So in saying that, I really want to highlight parenting is not the issue at hand. Like I don't ever want to attribute my struggles to my loving family and support system because I think they're part of the system in which we need to kind of recreate a better system for our population and demographic, you know. So saying that, like we kind of all went through different aspects of trauma. You know, I've probably been through and seen quite a bit of it. I grew up in a household where there were addicts in front of my face. You know, there was a lot of different events, you know, that went on. And not that I was like a single victim, shall you say, of that, because I think what makes it unique is that my story is not unique at all. It's an everyday story, and I'm sure you hear that. It's kind of cliche, but it's true. Like, growing up, I rationalized that. I go, well, the kid next door is getting the same, you know, butt whooping from their mom, or like the dad and the cousins are operating the same way mine are. So it wasn't necessarily pathologized, and not that I think it should be per se, but you just live with that culture, you know. So as you go, you know, and the unique thing on top of just what Latinx communities, the trauma that they experience, there's a lot of intersectionalities within all communities. So for me, it was not just being Latinx and what that meant in America. You know, I'm not a first generation Mexican American. I am a third generation Mexican American. I did not speak bilingual, fluent Spanish, you know, so I felt really wedged between American culture and Mexican culture. And to some degree, you always felt a little oppression from both sides. Like I didn't speak the link. So if you ever watch the movie Selena, she does a good representation. That's a very true representation. I'm not Selena, but you're not white enough and you're not brown enough. So like I kind of went through this like, well, I live in America, so I'm acclimating to the culture, to the education system, all that, you know. And along that way, I also realized that I identified as a queer individual, you know. But at the time, so I'm a little older, mid-30s, you know, at the time, it was still like a closeted environment, you know. So I sort of had to navigate my teen years, my young years of like what that really meant for me. And I wasn't excited about it. You know, I grew up Catholic, you know, and that's the predominant religion for, you know, a lot of Latin communities. And I loved being Catholic. I loved it. I loved going to church. I loved it. You know, I was here for it, you know, and I just love that it connected me to other people and there was traditions connected to it, you know, and you don't really fully understand as a kid what that process is. So, you know, and having to essentially develop, in a household where like 50% were fairly okay with my queerness, where the other 50% wasn't. And that was a very harsh reality to face, you know, and again, there's no blame on my parents, you know. I think they operated based off of what they knew and felt safe for them. I mean, at the time I didn't understand that, but I do now through my healing and recovery. But those are all tough experiences, and they're very, you know, they shape who you become. They shape that internalized narrative that you sort of operate on, you know, and that narrative where it kept me very successful in many ways of like pushing myself hard, because I was also an athlete, you know. So feeling, I think, a lot of shame, which is a common language for a lot of people, because I also had experienced different sorts of trauma in my younger years that really ignited that shame too. So you go through life like using a shame-based approach to thrive, and essentially I hit a wall, you know, and it was sort of all I needed was, you know, the straw to break the camel's back.
Right.
And I hit it. And you know, the funny thing is I started to go through experiences that clients I had gone through, like my pain, my struggles, like the narrative, like, you know, I'm not sober, you know, but I knew that there were struggles I had along the way, and that process that had me looking at my relationship to things that weren't good for me, and, you know, really heal. So that process I'm very fortunate for, because it's allowed me to look at things astronomically different, and it really has propelled me to really do my own work and know that there's a lot of people that really need the help the way that I needed it.
Yeah. And from what I'm hearing, you know, as a youngster being in your teen years, the obstacles that you faced, you know, the societal norms and the environment you were in, and just that feeling of belonging.
Yeah.
You know, where do you belong? I know even for someone that doesn't have all those things going on, just being a teenager is so hard to figure out who you are and where do you belong.
Yeah.
You know, what are some suggestions that you have to families and to the youngster that's going through this at the time when it's so heavy and so hard to deal with?
Yeah, well, I mean, first thing I definitely want to say, kind of to speak to the LGBTQ community and their needs and their care, you know, being a queer individual, like, that's not the problem. The problem is our ability to belong and be part of, you know, the larger society, you know, shall I say? And so the struggles don't come with the fact that they identify how we identify. It comes with that we deal with oppression, and you know, we're a marginalized community that doesn't have access to specific care or come into contact with folks who really know about us or how to respect our process, as well as give us the best informed treatment, you know. So I think that's really important, and, you know, and I think for, you know, the Latinx community, one thing I love about our community is we're a strong community, you know. We have to be. There's a lot of oppression within that, you know, people migrating to this country, and the negative stigmas, you know, that my community can face on a regular basis, you know. Like, you know, might not have been so aware, you know, but there are moments where I think I dealt with things and I didn't know that they were oppression, because you become conditioned, right? You know, so I think it's important to, you know, kind of understand, like, we are a very strong community. We're very resilient, you know, but it's not a weakness to be vulnerable and to really heal the everyday struggle that we go through. Like, a lot of people work hard. They have to deal with fears, you know. One thing that I always try to say to providers, you know, is sort of know your privilege. You know, I know, like, me as an Latinx queer individual, I still try to remind myself of my privilege, because I think society will look at me as a cisgender female, to be honest, sort of light-skinned, and I speak English very well, and I'm educated, so there's some sense of privilege I have to even sit in this seat and share this moment with you that a lot of people don't have, you know. So I think it's kind of understanding the power and privilege that we all hold when we come into contact with people who are very vulnerable when they take that first step.
And so how do we do more of that? Because this obviously led you into your life of being a therapist and educating and advocating. So how does that start? What do you do?
Well, I think it's education is going to be a huge one. You know, a lot of programs are, you know, specifically when I'm speaking to, you know, sort of the LGBT community, a lot of programs, you know, want to say, oh, we treat people from the community and we're, you know, LGBTQ friendly and affirming. And, you know, I might visit the program and I'm like, it's not, it's a lot of programs may operate on a cookie cutter model, and that ultimately is re-traumatizing the community a lot of times. Like, we have to make it individualized, we have to get to know our people that we service. Being LGBTQ plus is an opportunity to learn. Learning about communities outside of ourselves are really just opportunities to learn. So I think it's a lot of programs, because there maybe some programs are very medical model based on, because insurance asks them to be, right? Like, what are your symptoms? What are these? I think it's really important to really understand people, and like when someone comes to your chair, like what it means to just be that person within the world that they exist in. How do they view themselves within that world? Because even an identified cisgender, queer, Latinx person, I'm just me. I'm not a full representation of every other cisgender, Latinx people. We're each just individuals. So I think educating yourself at large, but like really taking time to connect with the person that you're treating.
So currently you have your own private practice,
Yep.
and you go around to treatment centers, mental health facilities, and you do an education.
Yeah, so on top of my private practice work, I do a lot of consultation with programs around LGBTQ plus topics on how to enhance their programs to better serve the community. And then on top of that, like if I'm networking, with these programs, like I do it specifically because it's important for me to know that they are truly doing everything that they can to support, the populations that I connect with.
What have been your struggles that you have found going through treatment centers and doing this? What has been like the things that stand out the most?
I mean, I think it's the things that we've always come into contact with. People don't like it. People don't agree with it. People struggle with change. And that's not even just particular to like queer topics. Like, I'm a huge trauma buff, and I remember, when I went through my education, like I picked it up pretty quick, and I was like, hey, why isn't everybody doing this type of work? Why isn't everybody using ACE scores and doing a very trauma-informed approach? And people are like, we don't do trauma-informed care. And it's comical now, right? When you think about it,
Yeah.
People, again, are still using curriculums that are just sort of a cookie cutter for heterosexual, maybe even male-oriented populations. So those are huge. I think the culture is really huge. Being willing to service this community is really a culture change. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to do this on the form. The thing is, humans are constantly evolving, right? So a lot of people go, I don't want to learn about that, but it's like saying, I don't want to learn about that person. That's what that really means. So I think it's an ability to also be vulnerable with yourself in your process, because you're going to make mistakes. I make mistakes in growing and educating myself on topics that I'm part of, like in the community that I'm part of. There's so much for me to learn. So I think people, and I don't think this is just with the queer community, I think sometimes people in treatment have struggles with accountability, like to say like, I did that wrong, let me fix it.
For sure. Yeah, or have the willingness to ask a question and not know,
Yes.
like we've talked about this before, and I think a lot of people are intimidated with the LGBTQ community, just not understanding and not asking questions.
Yes, yeah.
And I think like what you're saying, trying to understand, have a conversation, get on that level.
Yeah.
That we're able to do this and be vulnerable and talk about these things. What would you say is some of the most prevalent things in the LGBTQ community that people don't understand, or that it's this ongoing conflict?
I just think our general safety is always going to be an undertone of who we are, and I remotely always feel safe as an individual. But I think it's also because as I present, people don't know really what category to put me in. A lot of times they're going, maybe she's straight, maybe she's gay. I dealt with a lot of that in my career of like, you could hear them like, she's, so even that, just being safe to express who we are, to just exist, right? Like if you think about the most recent Colorado shootings, like those are big events in our lives. Like we don't take those lightly. We carry those with us, because what makes our community so special is we're a family a lot of times. So it's hard to kind of have that general fear, because here we are just like a community, and we don't get to exist everywhere. They go, okay, let me put you in this small community. So LA, it's West Hollywood, you know, in different areas, it's like that's the gay area, right?
Right.
So here you have people just in their gay area, you know,
yeah.
and still someone said that's not good enough. So they separated us into a sub-community of the city, and then like we're locked behind these closed doors in the dark, and he still went in there to sort of eliminate us. I guess that's the message that we receive. So I think safety is always going to be a huge thing that we have to remind ourselves, that it's not always safe to just walk down the street and exist. So like when you're trying to give resources, you really have to understand, like, do they feel safe with these resources? Do they feel safe with you? I was taught to be alarmed of law enforcement. I was taught to be alarmed of different races that weren't mine. And then that's a very negative viewpoint to have. And I've very much done a lot of work to get away from it, because that's not who I am. But when you're taught these scary things about these people who don't treat you equally, like how do you not reinforce those thought processes? You know, and we don't feel like we belong. We don't feel like we could trust people. We don't feel comfortable to be ourselves. We're in a box. We're in this heterosexual, cisgender, normative box that in order for you to like us, we have to exist in the box sometimes, you know?
Yeah.
It's heavy. Yeah.
It is heavy. And there's so much that needs to change. And just that awareness and accountability and vulnerability, it needs to be there. And then, so you're Catholic.
I grew up Catholic.
Okay.
I would definitely say I'm a little less religious now, but I'm super spiritual. So I've always, you know, been connected spiritually, and it's a part of my practice. I do a lot of holistic work. I don't push my spiritual agenda. I just try to acknowledge that when I get clients, like, I do think it's important to the larger work. But I mean, my higher power is God and Jesus Christ. So yeah, I kind of live to the Christian Catholic philosophies.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so someone that's struggling with that's out there watching, because I know there can be that conflict, right? What would you say?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I think it's super important for people to know, like, just because we're part of the community, that like we don't have any sense of spiritual life or religious life. I went to church majority of my life. I still sort of engage in that. What I find to be most important is my relationship with my higher power, because from what I understand, religion is sort of a man-made entity, and spirituality happens at all time, right? Like, I don't just
agree.
Yeah, you know, I don't just show up on Sunday. It's a part of my everyday life. TJ Woodward talks about this in Conscious Recovery. Hi, TJ. About entering each room. If you've read his book, and spirituality is one of those rooms, and I always tell people about that, because right, we're a small being in such a large world, you know, and I think that's a spiritual experience. So I think, you know, for people who are part of the community, I don't think we have to lose that part of us if it is important to us. And I know for me, my religious guilt and trauma was huge. It really was the cornerstone for a lot of my shame and guilt. Because that's what I heard. I heard you're going to go to hell. I heard it on a regular basis in my home, because that was the fear. That was the fear that the religion had instilled, and people believe it's a reality, you know. And so for me, I've kind of sort of found my way, because like I like to live on the New Testament. I like to believe, like, if I can WWJD, not Janae, but like the original one, you know. I truly believe that, you know. I believe in the process of, you know, the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, and how it allowed us to be healed and forgiven and whole and seen. Like, people can look at queer people like, you're a sinner, you know, and the reality is we're all sinners if you live accordance to the Catholic philosophy. Everybody sins every day. So my sin is no greater than anybody, and Jesus Christ, you know, died and rose from the dead in forgiveness of my life, and that's what I believe every day.
You have so much passion.
Yeah.
How do you keep that going on a daily basis, and in your practice, and dealing with a lot of people's stuff and emotions, and how do you keep that passion?
You know, I've learned a lot along the way, because I think the passion is always there. You know, I think even before I've done this work, I was like truly meant to be a helper. Like, that's just what I know. I love people. Like, I love being around people. I love that they feel good, and, you know, and so I think that what drives me is just like my faith in knowing that like every day is a gift and every day is a blessing. And I may not feel that every day, but I know logically that that's what drives me, and philosophically and everything that I do. And I just want people to feel good. You know, when I feel good, it feels really good. And I know I haven't really tapped into the full feel good, you know, so I want people who look like me to feel that way and to feel like anything's possible, you know, and that drives me in my mind that like, if you put your mind to it, as hard as it is, like anything's possible. But my healing has really ignited like my ability to feel good, to connect to other people, really, and allow them to be like, I now practice what I preach. Before I was like, oh, you could do this, I'll prescribe you that, and I'm not going to do this though, because like in my culture, you know, therapy is a taboo. We didn't do it. You know, people always tell me like how I came to become a therapist, and you know, it's a really funny story because it just sort of fell on my lap. Like, I went to school. I was the first one to ever go to college. Didn't know what I was gonna do. Took a human sexuality class and was like, boom, that's it. That's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
And I went into psychology, got my BA, realized you couldn't make money. So, and my teachers at the time, my professors are like, you'd be a really good therapist. And I'm like, okay. And I just remember thinking it was just a load of crap. But I was like, I'll be a therapist though. And my partner at the time was also studying to do the same and was like, how are you going to be a therapist if you don't believe in therapy? And I'm like, well, why do doctors smoke or eat hamburgers? You know, it was the philosophy, you know? So, but I think being able to have like a very similar human experience to some of the people who've struggled like myself, and to really acknowledge like, I'm no different than anybody else. I'm just like a person, and every moment I get with my clients is such a privilege, and seeing them thrive is really what pushes me to know that I feel like a lot of sadness for a lot of oppressed communities, and I want to be part of the change, but I'm now learning how to create a life and include my work in that versus like work and fit my life. And I found I've become a way better therapist doing that.
Going forward, your mission, what does that look like for you?
For me personally is really just being the change, taking action, speaking on truths, speaking on things that are important to me. Listening really is a huge, like if I were to put at the top of the list, it's listening, you know. I don't need to have the answers. I'm not designed to know the answers. I don't want all the answers, and that's been a relieving process, but that's gonna allow me to connect to people a lot more. So all of the narratives that have been, you know, counterproductive to my process are counterproductive to people or change, like I'm just removing it. Like I'm really trying to create like positive energy in my life and for those who I come into contact with. Yeah.
And so for people out there that are hesitant to be accepting of the community, what would you say to those people?
You know, I'm always like really, you know, it's funny because I just did a speaker event not too long ago, and one of the women was like, everybody should be an ally. And I was like, I don't know that that's the best way to say it. Like, you should. I don't think that that's the reality. I didn't accept my own self. Like, I had a lot of internalized shame because of my religion. And if you told me, don't think like that, like, excuse my French, but I was like, you, I'm gonna think however I want to think, like, because God is everything, and I know that that was right, and blah, you know, blah, 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 you know. And so I just feel like I know that that's not an easy process for people to kind of come to terms with, because they've been instilled with fear. A lot of times people just fear us, and that's what I believe. They fear things they don't know. Like, I think if people got to know me, they may like me. That's just how I feel.
You're likable.
Yeah, I think, you know?
Yeah.
So I've always believed that in my mind, so I never took it personal, because I was like, if we could just sit at the table and break bread, I think we'd like each other, you know? So like, just give us an opportunity. I'm not asking people to change their religious views or how they go about their life. I'm just asking them to be a human, you know, and connect with me on a human level, and to know that like, we have a lot of defense mechanisms. It's not because we're trying to be rude or anything like that. It's because like, we're afraid back. Like, we're afraid to be vulnerable and share ourselves with people because, you know, we've been told we're wrong. We've been told we're different. We've been told, even in like the work environment, like as a therapist, like I never knew how I could be in the work environment. I never knew if I could share my life, if I could be safe enough to do that with people. Usually somehow me and the other gay person in the workplace found out about each other because I think we have good gaydar, and we would become friends, and then we were allies, and then we just kind of navigated the rest of the offices with each other of like, is it okay yet to tell people? Is it not? You know, and those are things I still navigate to this day, you know, and knowing I don't need to, but like you have to break through, build safety, you know what I mean? So
yeah, and having that human experience.
Exactly.
Like you said, like sit down, have a human experience. You know, that's just what it comes down to. You know, it's
less about like I'm asking you to like live my life. It's more about acknowledging that I'm just a person in this world who's choosing to live the life how I want to live, and I have to come to terms with like however that looks like in my personal life and with my higher power or whatever that looks like. I'm not asking you to take on my life. I'm just asking you to respect me as a human being. That's it.
That should just be the slogan.
Yeah, right.
It should just be everywhere.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So you have your own private practice. So what are your specialties within that practice, and how can people find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, I own and operate my own private practice, and I do a lot of consultation work around like LGBTQ, Latin X, and people of color topics. Really just trying to get the word out there. I do virtual services throughout the state of California. I do that as a means to reach more individuals who would like to access my care. I absolutely love working with the LGBTQ plus community. I do specific LGBTQ plus couples only. I understand that that's a huge challenge for queer individuals to find queer identified therapists who only work with queer couples. Obviously I love working with Latinx and people of color. A lot of my work is, you know, that deeper inner self, like usually people come to me because they've hit a wall and they don't know how to break through, you know, so those are the folks I work with. But I'm a certified clinical trauma professional. I'm a certified integrative mental health professional, as well as a certified EMDR provider. So I just do like a collection of, you know, approaches like IFS, EMDR, and a lot of those bread and butters we like to pull to really help people, you know, address those traumas that really kind of keep them stuck.
Okay, and how can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm on all social media. So I'm on, well, not all of them. I'm on social, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. It's just Janae Borrego, LMFT. And then you can message me through there. All my information is on the social medias. I know a lot of people like to access that. But I do have a website. So it's https Janae Borrego, LMFT.com.
Okay. Can you spell out your name?
Yeah, so my name is Janae, Janae. Last name is Borrego, Borrego. So it's Janae Borrego, LMFT.com.
Just rewind and play that back as many times as you need.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
You are so special.
You're so special. I just want to thank you for this moment because you have amazing energy.
Oh, thanks. So do you.
Thank you.
Thanks for everything you do for the LGBTQ community, and for all the work you do for professionals and people to be educated in this space, and for being vulnerable and open about your life. You're very special. So thank you.
Well, thank you for listening. I think you're very special to create space for all individuals that you create space for here.
Thank you. All right, you guys, have a great day. We'll see you next time. Bye.